Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion, it's not a straightforward review, it's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening. Hey, this is Lisa, and if you want to catch up with me on Twitter or X, you can find me at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast, and we have a Patreon. The show is always free, but if you want to support me on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/I Love That Movie. And if you like the show today, please subscribe and rate it. It helps new listeners find us. And I have a familiar voice on the podcast. I have Chris Balga.
Hey, Lisa. How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. I'm so excited to have you back. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit if people haven't heard you on the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Chris Balga. I am a part of the Geek Ultimate Alliance network, and the show I have on there is Marvel Alliance, where I'm a co-host with my friend Brent, and it's a weekly show. We do it live on Thursday nights on the Geekverse podcast YouTube channel if you want to watch it live, but we drop the audio on the Marvel Alliance solo feed on any podcast of choice. And you can also catch me on Saturdays with my other group, the Brave and the Boys. We do a weekly, we call it the Organic Price Books Buyer's Guide. We're affiliated with them and do a weekly buyer's guide for all the weekly graphic novels that drop each week. So you can catch that on the Brave and the Boys channel on YouTube.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on, Chris. I'm excited to have you. And, you know, my guest always picks the movie. So what movie did you choose to talk about today?
I decided to, I've done a lot of sci-fi stuff, done some cape stuff with you all, but I decided to go for, some good old action drama, cat and mouse kind of game. That would be the movie Heat from 1995, directed and written by Michael Mann.
Yes. And, in some ways it's a little bit comic book adjacent, right?
True.
Because it inspired a comic book movie, or at least parts of it.
Yes.
But I'm sure we'll talk about all that. So, if this is your first time listening to this show, you might think that we're going to do like a spoiler free, then a spoiler filled, but we're going to talk about the movie. There's no filter here, so we'll just be kind of rolling through it. So if you want to watch this movie first, you might want to pause. And I actually watched it on Pluto TV.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it had a million ads, unfortunately, but
that's okay. You got through it.
Yeah, and it's a 3-hour and 45-minute movie, right? So it's pretty long, but it was very enjoyable, and so you can watch it for free there. If you're still here, I'm going to go ahead and read the summary. Master criminal Neil McCauley is trying to control the rogue actions of one of his men, while also planning one last big heist before retiring. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Hannah attempts to track down McCauley as he deals with the chaos in his own life, including the infidelity of his wife and mental health of his stepdaughter. McCauley and Hannah discover a mutual respect even as they thwart each other's plans.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that, you got Robert De Niro, you got Al Pacino, they have never been on screen together in the sense of in the same room. They were obviously in The Godfather Part 2, but never were in the same room. But I never saw this when it was first in theaters. I was still too young at that point to be allowed to go see a rated R movie like this. So I saw this much, much later. But I remember seeing, like, on the Blu-ray features, that the trailer for it and how they were touting this as, like, two biggest icons finally being in the same room together. And what better way to be cop, and criminal And either one
Yeah.
could have gone either way. I could have been fine seeing the roles reversed too, but it was
Yeah.
just very, very cool to see this kind of setup. And Michael Mann's just great at doing these types of movies.
Yeah. And so you mentioned already, obviously, that when this came out, you would have been too young. I think I would have been too young as well, probably like 11.
Yeah,
But when did you first see this? Like, how old were you? What was the setting?
I was definitely in college when I first saw this, so
Hmm.
I was kind of, I was as being on the show a number of times. I'm a big movie kind of buff, and
Yeah.
so all these kind of you finally start getting acquainted with all these different types of films, and just Heat was probably we watched it in my and someone's dorm room one night, and just hooked at that point, and I just did a huge deep dive into Michael Mann thereafter.
Nice. I just now saw this for the first time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's one of those movies I kept meaning to get around to, and I never did. So I was really excited that you picked it because it would force me to finally watch it.
Makes
And
me
it's
excited because
weird.
now I definitely want to hear even your points of view on what you saw.
Yeah, I'm really shocked that it took me this long considering who's in it.
Hmm.
And what a huge fan I am of, like, the Godfather movies, but also like Goodfellas and just like the types of films that I like. It's strange that it took me so long, but I alluded to earlier that that kind of opening scene of The Dark Knight was
Hmm.
inspired by this movie, right? And
Yes.
so again, like, why would I not have seen it, right? But I really, really enjoyed it. I
Hmm.
really liked
That's
it.
that.
It was really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long one,
Hmm.
and especially looking at like I always go to they call it the definitive cut of Michael
Hmm.
Mann's one. So I don't even know what even the theatrical cut would even be anymore because that's all I
I
ever
know,
seem to
right?
watch. So
Yeah. What I saw, I don't think was the theatrical cut, but I
gotcha.
could be wrong.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You don't need to see it. You've seen the purest form according to Michael Mann. So
Yeah, I did see that. I did see that he wasn't a real big fan. So, we talked a little bit about the synopsis and we've talked about Michael Mann. I guess we can kind of transition into talking about him a little bit more. He wrote
hmm
and directed this. And he also, is responsible for a lot of very popular films, such as The Last of the Mohicans, The Insider, and most recently Ferrari. Did you see Ferrari?
yes, I saw
Okay.
Ferrari. Really loved it. Loved the whole. I it's one of those things where it was one of those where I appreciate for what he was trying to do. I try to go into
Yeah.
movies where, in this kind of case, with what he was trying to aim for, so I enjoyed it for what it's aimed for. It is definitely not one of my top favorites from Michael Mann, but I
Yeah.
appreciate what he was trying to do with it.
I think it was a bit goofy, but I liked that about it.
Hmm.
Like, there was a fun to that film to me. I enjoyed it. And I think over time, more people did as well, but yeah, I liked it.
Yeah,
Um,
my personal favorites of Michael Mann are always going to be like, besides Heat, The Insider, Collateral, and
mhm.
Miami Vice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, the Miami Vice movie. I didn't mention that. Um, so you said that you kind of went on a deep dive after this. So this really changed your perspective, I guess, on this director, or maybe you
Yeah,
hadn't seen his stuff before.
I don't even think I'd seen Last Mohicans at that point. So,
Hmm.
seeing it and just kind of looking up like everything he'd done. So at that point, realizing I'd seen Ali, but didn't know that Michael Mann at my time when I saw it, it was like I
Yeah.
don't know a director from Save My Life at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it opened up a lot of doors. Like I said, from Ali to Collateral, in
Hmm.
Miami Vice, it was just great. I enjoy his perspective and how he films his movies.
Yeah. I saw this described as like the best B movie ever made. Do you agree with that?
the They called Heat the best B movie ever.
Yeah. I
I will.
think because it's not serious in the sense of, like, it's really well done. It's a drama, but
Mhm.
it is an action movie,
Yeah,
so it's almost like it's not really like, this isn't The Godfather, essentially.
no, but I
You
mean,
know?
I mean, you could say that about a lot of action movies. I mean, I
I
wouldn't.
agree. I agree.
It's just one of those where to call it just the best B movie is just like I,
It's a little
I'll
bit
be that.
disrespectful.
I'd say a bit disrespectful, and I
Okay.
would just simply leave it at the GIF I usually use in some of our group chats when we kind of go back and forth and kind of hitting our heads against the wall. We're not going to see each other's view. I'll just put the GIF of Adam Sandler from Uncut Gems saying, "I disagree."
Okay. 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 And that's fair. Yeah, that's an article that like popped up when I was looking at it, but
Interesting.
yeah,
I,
interesting.
You
I
have to
agree
send
with you, I think.
you have to send me that. I'm always curious to see why they would call it that. But everyone's
Yeah.
opinion.
You're like, you send me that right now.
I'm
I need
gonna
to
I'm
talk
gonna
to
stop
someone.
type it off at that point. But I'm
Yeah.
curious to see that. But that's interesting. The
Yeah.
best B movie. I have other things that I
Yeah.
would call the best B movie. So
Well, I'd like to, I'd like to, we talked a little bit about the director, and I
mhm,
want to transition before we talk about the actors to say a couple of quick facts, fun
mhm.
facts that I have. I just got a couple. The first one, I like this one. It said, rather than dubbing in the gunshots during the bank robbery shootout, Michael Mann had microphones carefully placed around the set so the audio could be captured live. This added to the impact of the scene because it sounded like no other gunfight shown on screen at that point.
Yeah, I mean the sound quality of this one. I mean
Yeah.
that is a great thing for him to do in a
Hmm.
sense of like with when it comes to editing, but just to capture it in the moment and to make sure you wouldn't have to, like you said, do it in post, add it in,
Hmm.
make it sound like less organic and not lining up.
Right, right. I think it adds to the tension.
Hmm.
In a lot of this movie, there's a lot of tension. You're feeling anxious watching some of these scenes, and I think the realism added to that for sure. But now we've almost gone the other direction where sound is so real sometimes that it's almost hard to understand people.
Yeah.
But so I guess we can blame Michael Mann. But in an interview with Al Pacino on the DVD special edition, Pacino revealed that for the scene in the restaurant between Hannah and Macaulay, Robert De Niro felt the scene should not be rehearsed so that the unfamiliarity between the two characters would seem more genuine, and Michael Mann agreed and shot the scene with no practice rehearsals. I
I,
guess
I,
only two amazing actors could do things without rehearsals, huh?
oh yeah, and I remember hearing that during the special features and just saying, that's what makes them some of the best in the game. And
Mm-hmm.
even at that time, recognizing that, we've never seen each other, we want to keep that idea going, and just to have it, like you said, that tension. If they're never going to be seeing each other or having to rehearse, like they know what's at stake at that moment because it's gotten. I mean, you're almost couple almost pretty much almost at 2 hours by that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's this again, this cat and mouse game, and they're just sitting down, and they know at that point that Pacino knows what he's about to do, and just saying, "I'm giving you a chance. Yeah, I
Hmm.
can't nab you on anything that you won't just get out of jail quick, and then you'll be gone. But I'm giving you this shot." And it's literally, I mean, that's what many things Heat is known for. But that's that diner scene where they're sitting down and having that conversation. What all of us who have been waiting for that moment, yeah, they nailed it with that.
Yeah. And I think I didn't add this, but there was another quick fact or an article or something that I had read about how the characters in this film, it's interesting how much of a almost like kinship they have with each other, even
Hmm.
though they're after each other, and then but a lack of a connection to the women in their life, to their
Yes.
families.
Hmm.
And so it's almost like they're the only two that can truly understand each other, but also points out like how sick and wrong that is. It's messed up to be closer to your enemy than your family,
Hmm.
and that's interesting.
Right.
Then Val Kilmer was thrilled to learn that the moment in the gun battle scene where he runs out of bullets and rapidly changes the magazine is actually regularly shown to Marine recruits as an example of how to perform the action properly, which I don't think in most cases, from talking to my friend that was a cop, most of the time they're not showing people movies because they're not typically the most accurate. So that's interesting.
Hey, you know what? Whatever. At that point, some more props to him saying, Michael Mann saying, my film is showing how the Marines use this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess maybe that implies that he had some sort of military background without saying it.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. The character, I mean.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this cast because it is stacked.
Yes. I mean, you've got, I mean, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro.
Yeah,
I mean, we
obviously.
could literally spend a whole, and there have been a number of times on your podcast that people have
Yeah.
had those films. I mean, just the who's who, the what's what of the
Hmm.
films from Godfather, all the way down to even some, you know, even Robert De Niro. I love seeing even him doing comedies and doing
Yeah.
different things recently. What he's been doing.
Hmm. Hmm. You've got Val Kilmer, John Voight,
Hmm.
um, you know, let's see, Hank Azaria. Like,
Yeah,
just interesting.
in a very sleazy kind of role for him. Tom
Yeah.
Sizemore's in this. Ashley
Yes.
Judd.
Yep.
Um, and even you just decide you already know who's getting top billing between Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. Like they're at the top,
Hmm.
but Val Kilmer getting that third listing on the movie poster just shows where even he at his career was at. Just to be
Yeah, that's a good
pictured
point.
in this movie that he is the third lead in this.
Yeah, it's incredible. Oh, also Ted Levine and Natalie Portman, a very young Natalie Portman.
Yes, Natalie Portman just getting. I mean, just beginning. just
Yeah.
even her role in this, it could be very much looked at as thrown away, but it also brings up the point of later on with Al Pacino's character and
Hmm.
how important that even even the his soon to be at that point, ex that points out it's like she went to your room. She wanted you to discover her. She wanted you to possibly save her. Like she found
Yeah.
that connection to him out of everyone else that her mother's ever been involved in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also William Fichtner, who I hope I'm saying his last name right. I don't say his name often, but he's in The Dark Knight, which is what I
Hmm.
was alluding to earlier. So that's kind of interesting. An obvious nod, right?
Yes, very.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I like this movie, and I'm gonna put one of the actors in it too.
Hmm.
Um, so again, a very stacked cast and a great one. I think you're right. Al Pacino and Robert De Niro together in a movie. It's just exciting, right? Like to see
Yes.
these two incredibly important actors go up against each other. And I kind of like Al Pacino being Vincent, specifically because he's the more like, I mean, the bigger performance of the two, right? I mean, he always is, but
Hmm.
I think it's fun for the detective to be that role instead of the criminal. And Robert De Niro plays it a little bit more, I guess, like I don't know, serious, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you definitely call it. He's very much typecast. I mean,
Hmm.
when hasn't he been a gangster? When hasn't he played
Right.
a mobster and the thing? He's just very good at it. And one could say like, oh, being typecasted, but guess what? Everyone's got a mortgage to pay, and why not have him do this another time, but do it to even a different level of not necessarily just he's just playing a criminal who's good at his game.
Yeah.
I mean,
Agreed.
even it's based off of you know a real life Neil McCauley, and
Hmm. Oh
the
yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that since we've kind of gone through the
yeah,
cast? Do you want to talk a little
it's
bit?
it's a there's that real life confrontation between he's a Chicago cop Chuck
Hmm.
Admonson and Neil McCauley, and Admonson was a retired police officer that Michael Mann had been working with off and on since his movie Thief. So they later worked together on some shows with Miami Vice in 1984 and then Crime Story in
Mm.
1986. And so, according to Chuck Admonson, Macaulay was a professional robber with whom he had frequently crossed paths with in events such as the scene between Vincent and Hannah in the coffee shop. And the warehouse sting really happened. And in real life, Neil Macaulay was killed during a robbery of a grocery store by Admonson's team, who were tipped off to the robbery.
Wow. Wow.
So he had this prior. So Michael Mann had this prior relationship working with him on his other projects.
Mm. Okay. Interesting.
So
Well, I guess we. Oh,
so
go
that's
ahead.
what sometimes people forget about. It's like, man,
Hmm.
it's. I mean, yeah, this. A lot of this didn't happen, but the essence of this cat and mouse game that they've been going after each other for years had been there.
Yeah. Wow. Let's talk, I guess, a little bit along those lines more about the plot. Like, do you want
Mhm.
to talk about some of your favorite scenes or
Yeah,
anything
definitely.
else? Sure.
So I really the way they even intro it and introducing us to both cast of characters, we get to see the current job that Neil's doing with his crew of trying to rob that what ends up being in the bearer bonds. And you can
Hmm.
kind of get very quickly like who is in with Neil, like who's good part of the crew, and very quickly you see who's the wild gun who's is going to cost them dearly,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and Wayne Grow, who basically goes off and ends up. I mean, I don't think necessarily Neil is obviously not opposed to killing, but if he doesn't have to, it eliminates a lot of complications.
Yeah.
So, but when Wangro just loses it and starts shooting the armored car people, you realize saying, "All right, now we're gonna see where when he eventually cuts them loose and deals with saying, all right, I can already start seeing where this is going, and it's not a bad thing necessarily, but I like that throughout the movie you constantly kind of see exactly he kind of keeps on coming up Wangro. He keeps on
Yes.
popping up throughout the movie, and you almost
Well,
like
he's really awful, right?
oh
Like
yeah, absolutely.
he has a there's a scene with like a sex worker that he kills, and we
Hmm.
later find out she was only 16. So it's just like
Yeah.
how could you possibly get more evil than that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Like when he eventually meets his end at
yeah.
that point, you're just like, yes, I'm rooting for this. You need to go.
Yeah. He's like, you know what? I actually have one more thing I need to do. And you're
Yep.
like, yes.
And at that point, you just gotta get out. But you're like, no, we even if this costs you your way of getting out, yes, it's absolutely need to be done.
Yeah. 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 He's there's just yeah, the criminals, they're criminals, and there's a lot of obvious, violence and things like that. But you're right, like they don't really want to hurt people. What they want
Hmm.
is money. But this guy, Wayne Grow or whatever, I think he enjoys making people hurt. And, it's
Yeah,
not really about the money for him. It's something else. And
yeah, sociopath,
yeah,
psychopath. It's
yeah,
it's not about. It's just about like you said, hurting people. But then
hmm,
you get some interesting ones where you've got like Chris, played by Val Kilmer,
hmm,
who he's we find out later he's a gambler. He's losing lots
hmm,
of money. He's I don't think he's married to. No, he is married because they remember they said that line like husband wife stuff. Um,
yeah,
Married with a kid. You know, she's one step out the door if he can't get his life together.
yeah,
But then you counter that with Michael,
hmm,
who has a family, seems to be doing pretty well, played by Tom Sizemore. He seems
hmm,
to be finding a balance to this. And
hmm,
really, even you find out later when they have that option to get out, he could probably get out and be fine.
yeah,
The one we don't hear too much of, and kind of like the wheelman, as it were, with Gilbert Trejo.
hmm,
And we don't really get too much out of him. He's kind of just there and ends up, unfortunately meeting his end when he decides to bail, not because Neil wants to take him out, but because everything's starting to close in on them all.
yeah. Yeah, there's so many people in this movie that he's mentioned far down on the list.
Yeah,
Like it's because there's not because he's not important. That's interesting that his name's even Trejo in the movie.
yeah, and it's Danny Trejo.
Obviously
Yeah,
Danny Trejo, but not Gilbert Trejo, but that's interesting.
but yeah,
Yeah,
that
you're
opening
right.
scene kind of establishes kind of exactly where. I mean, in those first 30 minutes, you learn exactly pretty much all you really need to know about the characters and how this is going to constantly keep coming up,
Mhm.
and how that one score through the botched armored car thing is like, oh, they're getting the bearer bonds from this guy, they're going to steal it and then sell it back to him
Mhm.
twice the price, while he's saying, hey, you're still going to make money at this because of your insurance.
Mhm.
But that guy that they stole the bearer bonds from is like, no, I'm gonna see if I can come after you and screw you over. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's gonna work out the way you think it's going to.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's one thing I wanted to point out about this movie that we haven't really talked about yet is, do you feel like we live in such a different world from 1995 that all the violence with the guns, like there's
Hmm.
tons of AK-47s in like every single scene or whatever they're called, AR-15s, I don't know what they're called. I'm not a gun person, but like, at some moments I'm like, if you take your headspace out of the movie, it's like, who are the cops protecting? Like they're shooting
Yeah.
everyone. Like people are just disposable in this film, and I wonder if it would be shot the same way today. You know?
Yeah, and there's even that, and there's just like, when is the last time we've ever even had, even back then, did we even have robberies like were like that
Yeah,
in that sense? Like even coming like even halfway close to this, it bank
yeah,
robberies like this just don't happen that often
yeah. They
because
don't.
everything's now digital.
Yeah, they're not
it,
necessary, I
it's not
guess.
necessary, and they'd only keep so much in there because of how many robberies were. I remember, you know, they would sometimes use call in bomb threats to schools in order
Hmm.
to get the cops all at the schools so they could go rob a bank.
Oh, okay.
So that
Interesting.
that that became kind of a thing. But yeah, it's one of those, to your point, like the person who called this like one of the best B movies, it's just, yeah, that's what you come to an action flick for. It is a
Yeah.
huge suspension of disbelief,
Oh, for sure. I'm
and
not
like you
saying it's
said, it's,
realistic.
oh yeah, no, I didn't think you were, but to your point, like it's almost comical how much are they really trying. But I'll even push back on that just because you even see when, Al Pacino at the ending scene when the big shootout
Yeah.
happens, like they do show people getting hit, but I don't equate it to, like, I don't think that even the cops are going to shoot with indiscretion.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's only one
But
scene that I
the
did.
criminals are,
Yeah, the criminals
using
for
it.
sure don't care. Um, but I just think it's interesting, now we live in a world where, in 1995, I don't think we were having a lot of like
Yeah.
mass shooting. So I do think if you made Heat today, it might look a little bit different because of that.
Well, even you look
Um,
at like even recent events can affect a trailer. Like you look at
yeah.
Captain America: Brave New World. The very first trailer has, someone pointing a gun and shooting the president at that point after what happened
Oh,
with
wow.
that scene no longer exists in the trailer. I don't
Oh,
think
oh,
there.
wow.
Yeah, look at any of the trailers. It'll quickly cut away after that
Yeah,
point as
yeah.
response.
We're
So,
just in a different place. I mean, I think it's
mhm.
like maybe in 1995 it's more fun because you're like, oh, this wouldn't happen, and now you're like,
It's a
well,
movie. Who cares?
yeah.
You know.
Now you're like, So I thought that was interesting.
And especially just how, like, even going back to what Van Sant, the one who they robbed, just thinks that he can get one over on them. It's just like,
Yeah.
dude, you're so far out of your league. Even when he tries to meet up with, like, his man meeting up with to exchange the bond to sell them, and it ends
Uh-huh.
up being an attempt on his life. I love when it calls from like the restaurant and says, "Who is this?" I said, "I'm not speaking to anyone on the other end." And he said, "No, you are." No, I'm speaking to a dead man because that's what you just did. You're a
Yeah, that
dead
was a
man.
good scene. I
It's like,
love that.
yes, you are a dead man now. Good luck to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and no one liked him. So
Yeah,
you don't feel sorry for him. You're not worried about him. You're like, I want him
yeah.
to go. So, that was a good scene. What's another great scene that you enjoyed?
Um, I do enjoy when, you start getting to know kind of Al Pacino and kind of where he's thinking and how this whole cat and mouse game starts going off,
Hmm.
where they start getting some information and how he starts, after, his big thing is they killed cops. They killed,
Yeah.
you know, oh, excuse me, not the cops, but they killed the armored police officers. And even he looks like they didn't have to do this. He looks around saying they had a perfect place. So what
Hmm.
happened?
Yeah.
And so that's where he takes personal investment in this, is saying, no, it's not just the robbery, it's that they took life when they didn't have to. And so that's kind of his motivation throughout this whole time and how he's getting in. But I love the scene where they're kind of
Hmm.
watching them leave the restaurant and just getting all their people. and
Yeah.
seeing exactly where they are. But when they start tracing them on how they're going to rob the bank, and they're watching from the van, and they see them exactly going in, and then someone coughs in the car, and you just see
Ugh.
that eye to eye, that infrared scan. You see just De Niro looking at it, they're looking back, and De Niro goes, "Nope, we're done. Walk away, walk away." And they're like, "Oh, we can take him now." And he's like, "For what? Breaking and entering? Then we
Yeah.
completely blow this, and we still can't get him on anything." And I love that kind of attitude where he wants to get it, and he'll bend the law. He'll come close to even breaking it at points, but he wants to get them because it's the principle of the matter to him. We're gonna get him. We're not gonna let him slink away somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
But especially when you get to that other scene later on where um, they kind of hear they're tapping their phones, they're hearing exactly where they're meeting, and they look like they're surveilled. They see, Chris, Neil, the whole crew's out this docks, and then they come out, and Al Pacino's just looking around, saying, "Well, they were here. They're looking out there. What do you see? What do you see? What do you see?" And then Al Pacino puts it together, and thinks like, "Oh my God, we just got made." He said, "What do you mean? Like, there's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing
Mm.
here. They drew us here so they could see who exactly is going." And he just like looks out and says, "Yep, you got me. You
Mm-hmm.
absolutely got me at that point."
Yeah.
I love that moment just because it's they're both the best at their game,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even then they'll get like they'll get tripped up by each other.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever think that, like, when you first saw this movie, like, I kind of didn't think Val Kilmer's character was going to make it. I felt like they were setting
Yeah,
him up to not make it, and that
I,
was his whole arc is very tense with his wife and
mhm.
the cops. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that Neil giving as many chances to Chris, like he saw him as like his son, like
Mm-hmm.
the son that
Yeah.
as a father that you said like I'm gonna give him another chance, give him another and like he even tells us she did you're gonna give him one more chance, and if he screws up again, I will pay you your way to get out of this, and you'll be set up for life,
Mm-hmm.
And so like I get it, uh, she loves them, but I think it's more of just I can't deal with this anymore, and which is why
Yeah.
she starts fooling around and fooling around with Hank Azaria's kind of sleazy warehouse kind of salesman kind of guy.
Yeah. Yeah. That was that was interesting for sure.
I do love that one of my other favorite things scenes I love in this one where Al Pacino, he gets what's Azaria's name in the Alan, where he
Okay.
gets when he starts interrogating him. It's, oh, I can't believe I fell for this. I knew this girl was trouble, and he goes the whole line because she's got a great ass, and just
Yeah.
that line, and I
I laugh so hard. Nick
in
and I
the
have been saying it like all day.
and just
It's so Al Pacino. It's
it is the
hilarious.
eyes, everything, but apparently that was improvised because and
Yeah.
Hank Azaria says like he was not ready for that, and the unexpected he said scared the hell out of him because he actually terrified me, and the look of shock was not acting at all.
Whoa. I also read that like his justification of the character acting that way is that
Hmm.
maybe he has like I guess in early parts of the script he had like a coke problem.
Yes.
And I'm like that would make sense, you know.
Especially they said like you could kind of see elements of it where
Hmm.
going back into the bathrooms you never saw him doing anything, but those are where the scenes they would do it. But it would be interesting just because you see his the girlfriend at that point also having
Yeah.
drug issues,
Hmm.
and so you wonder why the daughter is just like gravitating. She's looking for anyone that she doesn't respect the mom, and she's holding on to her biological father, who is also we never see him, but the constant abandonment, like she's trying to hold on to something like that can
Yeah.
actually be good as a parental figure.
Yeah, yeah, she's definitely trying to get his attention and again like his wife, cheating on him. I mean, she comes out and says she's only
I know,
doing
yeah.
it to try to get his attention, which I was like, that's so mean. It's just like I'm demeaning
I mean,
myself with
that's
this
a
person.
choice at that point,
Yeah, I
especially when he
know.
discovers it and he walks
Yeah.
in and said, "Oh yeah, this is so and so. I had sex with him," and he's like, "Oh, okay, here." And that whole conversation. But no, you get to be quiet now. He's watching my TV. I'm gonna take my TV and go. You can do
Yeah.
whatever you want. I don't, and she's like, "See, it's proven point. You don't care." So no, I did care, but the fact that when we got into this relationship, and this is and this is what I hear from a lot of friends that I have that are cops and married, especially when you get to the point of the where he's a detective, even state bureau. You even deal with this in the movie The Departed too. Like when
Yeah.
you're in that kind of life, that is you have to understand that you can't necessarily anyways talk about the job always, maybe
Oh
not at
yeah, it
all.
drives me crazy in every movie and every show.
Yep.
There's always a spouse that just does not understand at all what their job is. So I'm
Even
like,
though,
didn't you
yeah,
know
we've
this?
told you about it, I just can't deal with it anymore. And he calls her out and say, "Baby, you knew this was the life. I didn't
Yeah.
hide this. Could I be better? Yes. But when I'm on a case, this is my life." It's the
Yeah.
same thing. Like people are married in the CIA and they can't
Sure.
talk, like literally, they can't talk about their life.
Right. But also, I think in the context of this film, both of the main characters really struggle with their
Oh, absolutely.
relationships,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I think it's meant to be like they're a little too obsessed, they're a
Hmm.
little too, that's all they care about. And I mean, Robert De Niro's character says it a bunch of times in the movie about like cutting people loose. I kind of thought his girlfriend was going to be like a undercover cop or something at first when we
I
first met
thought
her.
that was going to be, especially the blind eye he took and got a little fast
Yeah.
and loose, even against his own rules. Like he said, when the heat's on, don't have any attachments that you can't drop and go within 15 minutes. And he's looking at Chris and Michael, and they've got families, they've got kids, they've made that choice.
Yeah.
And I think Chris would, and Chris is seen doing it, especially when Ashley Judd gives him the signal at the end not to come up to the apartment.
Yep.
He
Yep.
and he walks away. He completely walks away from it. Michael, I don't know if he could.
Yeah.
I think he seems to be more attached to the family life, which is fine, but
Hmm.
that for Neil, he even gets caught up with it because he tries to leave with his girl.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that those scenes kind of disturbing. I mean,
Hmm.
she figures out who he is and she's kind of like, "When can I leave?"
Yeah.
And then they really go back and forth and he's like, "Well, I want it to be your choice." But it's like, "Yeah, I don't know that it's really her choice." Like,
Hmm.
I mean, he I don't know. I mean, I guess he would let her go, but it's a pretty tense situation, but she does decide to back him,
Yeah, and
which is
it's just maybe
interesting.
the thrill of the life, and especially after I mean, again, going back to that diner sequence of them sitting
Hmm.
down and just basically laying it all on the table. You know, despite their mutual respect, they both acknowledge that they will kill each other if necessary. If
Yeah.
and so when Neil goes to the crew saying, you have a chance.
Hmm.
We cannot go forward with this, or we go all in. And he is basically I watched that scene a few times just saying he wants them to say no. Like Neil Felt says like, I don't need this.
Yeah.
Michael doesn't look like he needs this, but he knows Chris needs it. And he basically says like, I need this job. I have to do this. And so everyone's kind of feels like when Chris says he's in, it kind of makes everyone feel like, oh shoot,
Yeah.
and it kind of forces everyone's hand, except for Trejo, who ends up bailing out because he's like, but the heat's on me too much. I can't go through the. They end up getting what's his name? God, this kind of the name just escapes me. Played with he was the president in 24.
Uh, John Voight? I don't
No, 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 no. He was the new guy they ended up getting into.
Oh.
Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know 24 well
oh,
enough
gotcha.
to
I'm gonna look it up real quick.
yeah.
David Palmer. David
Okay,
Palmer.
okay.
Yeah, very young David Palmer. plays kind of their new wheelman
Hmm.
to replace Trejo at that point.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
And so, and they all come together, and like you said, like the whole last act. I mean, everyone, like, besides the diner sequence and everything like that big gun battle in the street, the bank robbery, is what everyone looks to this movie is like, oh my gosh, this is like all out. Even I remember Dane Cook even making fun of this in his comedy routine, talked about every guy wants to be part of a heist, and he's like being the movie Heat, and it's just like, we need the van, get in the van, where's the van?
I like what I like about Heat 2 is it's so different from a lot of other heist movies, right? Like it in some ways almost feels like it takes it more seriously. You know, it's
Yeah.
not Ocean's 11 or whatever,
No, no,
you know,
no.
like I like this version of it, you know.
Why did I say David Palmer? I meant Dennis Haysbert. David Palmer is the
Oh.
president of 24. Dennis
Oh.
Haysbert is the actor.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, that's
He
fine. I
plays.
mean, again, you're talking to someone who has no idea, so you
Yep.
could have told me anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but it's one of those things, like he's kind of like the red shirt in in Star Trek, saying
Star
he's
Trek.
coming in. He's like, "Yep, he's the first one killed." You know, very unglamorously, just shot
Yeah.
as he's trying to get them all out there, and just seeing Al Pacino run down what's just the busy street with this huge gun, just just chaos ensues
Yes.
all over the place.
Yeah. So good.
But especially like, and just seeing how, even though Chris's, Charlene can't stand Chris, what he's done to her, now she got to go under protection, she still sees him and will still say, I love you that much, just walk away,
Yeah.
leave,
She
don't
she
come
couldn't
back.
do it. Yeah. In the end, she cared too much.
And he ends up surviving out of this.
Yeah.
He's
That
one, but
shocked me. I was like,
I
he's not gonna
know,
get
I
through.
know, I was just like, of all the people, he makes it.
Yeah, I'm like, no, get rid of him. Bring back Robert De Niro.
uh,
Spoilers, I guess.
But yeah, well, we've just spoiled everything at this
Yeah,
point.
we've
So,
spoiled the whole movie, so it's
but
fine.
but even the ending itself, like when he's chasing him down, going back and forth. I mean, yes, it was a perfect way to end it. In the sense, it does come
Hmm.
down to Vincent, Lieutenant Vincent, and Neil. They they have to. One has to prevail, and I love it that it's this coming behind basically the concrete pylons near the airport, and them
Hmm.
going back and forth. Ammo's down. There was a scene. There was a part of the script where they ended up killing each other,
Oh,
and
interesting.
Michael Mann did not like that idea, so it wasn't filmed. It was at an early idea of the script, but he didn't want it. He did later use that in another movie, and I don't want to ruin it.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
and well, he didn't use it. A director that we just talked about that
Mm,
likes Michael Mann movies, he took that idea and used it in another script, and it
interesting.
was actually filmed, and it was a part of the movie. Interesting enough,
Wow.
also starring Al Pacino. So do
Wow.
your kind of wake backs, and there we are. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but it was the appropriate ending to do that. Like,
I agree.
Neil had gone, he'd broken so many of his own rules at that point.
Hmm.
It was he screwed around and found out and didn't follow his own
Yeah.
rules, and that was the only ending. I agree. I would not like to have Vincent and Neil take each other out, because I didn't want Lieutenant Vincent to be taken out. That I didn't. He
Yeah.
didn't. He didn't. It didn't deserve it. And people say, "Oh, it's a hero's death," but yeah, but he needs to survive. He needs to continue on.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So,
I like that idea of him being alive at the
mhm.
end. He didn't do anything to deserve that. Yeah. I think the audience wouldn't buy that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it would be a cool kind of cinematic. Oh, they take each other out in Guns and Glory. It's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, the idea that Michael Mann's writing, he wrote an official sequel novel, Heat 2.
Mm.
And it's about after Neil abandoned her at the hotel after making her almost an accessory to murder of Wangro. Edie was haunted by his morbid sentiment for Michael. he knew the risks. He didn't have to be there, which she could now relate to. So they
Hmm.
are getting ready to start putting that together, that movie.
Yeah, I saw that on IMDb.
Hmm.
So, wow.
Yeah.
I guess good timing to see
Yeah.
it now. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be just interesting just to see how that kind of brings about. Like, Edie bring, are they, how much far down the line is this going to be? So,
Yeah. Yeah, like I mean, Al Pacino's character would be retired, I would
yeah,
think, if he's in it. Yeah.
exactly.
But
But of all the things to focus on, Edie, you
mhm.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
Hmm.
Very
So,
cool.
but yeah, so I mean, I've probably seen this movie so many different times. It
Oh,
doesn't get
nice.
old. It always, I wouldn't say like I find new things about the movie. It's just a good action movie, and yes, it can be popcorny. It could be, according to some people, apparently the greatest B movie of all time. It's a great action movie, and when it comes down to, as you said earlier, aren't most action movies, even my favorite, one of my favorite franchises of all time, Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones, I have heard, and I think it's welcome. That's what Steven Spielberg does. It is a B movie elevated to A status.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
I agree.
and, and so if they want to call it a B movie, fine. But it's definitely, I think if you, I would challenge people to say, like, if you look at your greatest action movies, or at least in this genre, like criminal cop action movies, Heat is probably on most people's top 10 list
Yeah.
for that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
I think it's a classic for a reason. And as we've said several times, it's very well done. I think it did some brand new things for the genre, and I think one of those big things that I love is just the feeling of tension. Like it
hmm
feels real multiple times in the movie, where you're wondering what choices the characters are going to make, and the stakes
who's
keep
gonna
getting
make it?
higher, and who's going to make it. Yeah, it's really well done. It is a long runtime, but it is worth the long runtime, and
It
I
is a
I
true
definitely recommend it.
character is a true character study in the sense of almost all your main players, even most of your supporting players,
Hmm.
they have their time to shine. Like, you build up those moments. That's why I like it. Like, it's not your typical action movie that could be done by saying, this could have been cut by half an hour. Like, everything matters in how they do it and what they do. And yeah, you could say, oh, maybe that whole third act action sequence has been cut down. Yeah, but it's so cool.
Yeah,
It's a lot of
yeah.
fun.
It's a lot of fun. So we answered my couple of questions I
Yeah.
was going to ask you at the end. And for talking about, a movie that's has the runtime that does, I think
Mhm.
we had a very um succinct recap of it. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to talk about?
It would just be minor points at that point.
Hmm.
So I
Okay.
think kind of the major things we got a chance to gush about, and I'm happy that I gave you this first opportunity to watch it and you
Yes,
enjoyed it.
thank you. Yes, thank you for choosing this. There's so many movies out there like this that, you feel like you've seen everything, but there's always some films that you haven't seen that you want
Hmm.
to see. Um, well, Chris, before you go, is there anything else you want to plug?
No, I'll again plug my shows.
Hmm.
Check out Marvel Alliance. You can find that if you want to watch the live. We go live on the Geekverse podcast YouTube channel on Thursday
Hmm.
nights, 9:10 Eastern Standard Time. But if you want to just
Wonderful.
listen to the audio, just search for Marvel Alliance on any of your podcatchers of choice. Once a week, covering the wide range of everything going on in Marvel movies, TV, comics, everything like that. And then check me out on the Brave and the Boys YouTube channel on Saturdays for the Organic Price Books Buyer's Weekly Guide.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. It's always a pleasure. Really appreciate having you on and hope to have you back soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa.